Welcome to episode 45 of the Necronomicon.com. I am James Sabata, horror author, screenwriter, co-host of the podcast you're listening to right now. And the worst thing I've ever done to try to get famous was start a podcast. So I don't really think that I'm doing this correctly.
And I am Don Guillory, author, historian, educator, and obviously all my plans to become famous haven't worked. So here we are.
I don't even know who you are.
Who's that speaking to me right now?
Joining us today is horror author Brian Kirk. Brian, thank you for coming on the show and for pitching something completely different that we haven't done before.
I'm known to do that, so, but no, thank you guys for having me on. I'm excited to be on. I think it's going to be a fun discussion.
Excellent. You want to tell our listeners about yourself and your books and anything else?
Yeah. Well, as you said, I'm a writer primarily of surreal and psychological horror. I have two books that are currently out in the world. One is called Will Haunt You. The other is We Are Monsters, which was a finalist for a Bram Stoker Award a few years ago. Both out through the publisher Flame Tree Press, and have various stories out in anthologies that can be found. The most recent one is a novelette-length story in an anthology called Seven Deadliest, with other authors like John F. D. Taft and Bracken McLeod and Rena Mason. Have also had stories in Gutted Beautiful Horror Stories and Behold Oddities, Curiosities, and Undefinable Wonders. Which, as the anthology, won the Bram Stoker Award, not my specific story. So that's me in a nutshell. You can find me at my website, my work there, briankirkblog.com.
Awesome. Yeah, I mean, anthologies are how I started reading your stuff. I know we talked about this before we went on the air, but Doug Moreno, the editor of a couple of those that you mentioned, who's one of my friends from college. So I started reading your stuff. I loved your story in Gutted so much, and I know you're probably sick of hearing that, but, that led me to read your other stuff. And I'm just a big fan of anthologies now. Like, it helps me find authors and test the waters with them. And like, some people just really speak to me. And I just really want to encourage our listeners, go buy anthologies, like check people out. Like, this is such a great way for people to get to know authors.
I totally agree. It's interesting that, obviously writing a short story is such a different art form than writing a novel. I prefer writing novels. It's just, how I'm made up. I have a harder time writing a 3,000 word short story than I do a 100,000 word novel. So it's like, I come to them with trepidation, but I think they are incredibly important, incredibly helpful ways to introduce yourself to readers. And for readers, if you find editors whose taste you kind of align with, they can be amazing curators of writers for you to pull from. So, I think Doug has somewhat of an aesthetic and everyone has their own subjective taste and what they like and so forth. So if you pick up one or a couple of his anthologies and you tend to like, if you have the same taste as his, then all of a sudden it's going to open you up to a whole new world of writers that that you can all of a sudden just start pulling from. Same with like Ellen Datlow and all sorts of different editors. They all kind of have their own little aesthetic and kind of sphere of taste. And I think that's they can be great curators for readers. When we were initially talking, I know that your podcast is typically about kind of social commentary about horror movies. And it's, I'm not that much of a movie guy. One, I never go to theaters. I have this weird, I'm OCD, so I have these weird kind of, things about me. A theater I feel like I'm cattle in a theater. It's a weird sensation. So I go in, I get funneled into the theater, I sit down, I'm smushed in amongst people, and I love people, so that doesn't have much to do with it. I have to like look in a certain direction. I just feel weird. The whole experience makes me feel weird. So I always have to wait for movies to come out at home before either before when I could go to rent them or now when I can stream them. So I'm always behind regardless. And I'm just so much more of a reader than I am a film viewer. that there are very few films that really do it for me. I mean, the ones that do, I love. But so it's like, so I didn't feel like I had a whole lot to offer in terms of picking a film and really deconstructing it and break it down. What I am is an enormous and a huge documentary buff. I don't read a whole lot of nonfiction. I get all kind of my nonfiction type stories through documentaries. I watch documentaries all the time. I watch all types of documentaries, but I really love true crime documentaries. I'm fascinated by them. So I think, and there's just so much social commentary that you can get out of true crime documentaries. I feel there's so many different ways to look at it. But one of the things that interested me, and I think was part of this pitch, was in this whole world of reality TV and documenting these stories. All of a sudden, in many ways, we've made we've created these celebrity killers. We've created this environment where people can get this notoriety. These murderers can get this notoriety and kind of a celebrity from these terrible acts because we are so drawn to it, and we make movies. You know what I mean? Like we make them the star of a movie. And so anyway, that's just something that I've always found fascinating. And as soon as I learned what kind of the idea and the concept for your podcast was, I thought that would be something that I could talk about.
I love it. I think it's a great concept. All right, so let's go ahead and jump in. Where would you like to start with this, Brian? You're the guest, so you get to lead the way.
So, we've kind of talked about, so when we, I guess, first got introduced, the documentary that I most recently watched was, Don't Fuck with Cats, which is which made a huge splash and was a very polarizing film for a few reasons that we can talk about, but it in many ways kind of encapsulizes this whole idea of celebrity killers, because and I don't know about how much we want to spoil or whatnot, but
spoil away.
Spoil away.
Yeah, just talk spoilers constantly.
The whole idea with Don't Fuck with Cats, or the whole story behind it, is there was this online group, and I may mess this up a little bit, but basically I think there was this like online group for like cat lovers, and they would post memes and they'd talk about their cats, and and that was their community. And all of a sudden this individual posted something to this group, and you don't really see it, but it's like a snuff film for cats. He kills these little kittens in a really disturbing, horrific way, and posts it to traumatize these people. And as you go along, these people are so, offended and traumatized that they want to find out who this person is. So like kind of a select group from this community becomes these like online amateur sleuths, that are trying to investigate, who's behind this. And it turns into this kind of informal manhunt that kind of spirals and goes, and it actually leads to homicides of humans. And as you go through it, you realize that this killer is getting off on the chase. This killer is getting off on having people, I guess my point is, who knows if this killer would have been as interested in killing if he didn't have an audience, if he knew he wasn't getting a reaction, if he knew that he didn't have a adversary that he could attempt to outsmart and outwit and elude. And so there's this whole kind of relationship between an audience and in these killers that I wonder and I question, and it worries me that in some way it fuels their actions. So it's like the ultimate reality TV, where this is real people are dying, real kittens are dying, and I'm sure a large percentage, a large number of these psychopaths that are out there would be hurting people in some way, regardless of whether or not they could get notoriety out of it. But I think that there's a lot of that there's that aspect of being famous for it that drives a lot of it. And I just find it very confusing, and it's something. The way I explore things is through talking about it and thinking about it, and I don't really have a conclusion for it. So I thought this would be an interesting way to explore what I think about it.
Definitely. John, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, that's kind of where I was at the end of the documentary itself, or the documentary series, when I think her name is Teresa, but she goes by the pseudonym Body Moving online, and she has that statement that's where she feels some guilt and saying, well, I think if we hadn't egged the guy on, or at least by trying to find him, trying to catch him, that he wouldn't have killed his victim. And when I was watching that, I looked at my wife and I said, bullshit. I said, she has nothing to feel guilty about. I said, because we watch it just like you. I watch a lot of the true crime and the serial killer specials and documentaries and things like that. And one of the things that I remember growing up and watching these things, and then of course watching them in recent years, a lot of those famous killers that we, had these specials about, all talked about how they had mutilated animals when they were younger, or they had tried stuff out on animals first before, quote unquote, graduating to humans. Mm-hmm. And I just saw that this guy was just one of those people that he already had that curiosity. He already had that, and I hate even calling it dark side, but he had that demented call to do stuff like that. I think the only change is he put it online. It wasn't an issue of he wasn't going to do it. He was going to eventually do it. The question is whether or not he would have done it and put it online.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
I disagreed with her on that one.
No, and I know what you're saying. There's the whole notion of copycat killers, which obviously, like they had the whatever is inside someone that makes them, willing to kill. But it seemed like what motivated them to do it was being inspired by someone else's acts of doing it. You know what I mean? It's almost like in some of these, for some of these people, it is an art form. You know what I mean? It's almost like it's a calling, where it's like they feel like they're a part of this club. You know what I mean? And they'll talk about with reverence. You know what I mean? Some of the OG killers that, before, their body count and how long they were able to get away with it and the way they outwitted and they seem to do it with real reverence and, and admiration for these other, So anyway, like anything else, there's a spectrum. I'm sure there are absolute killers. Forget, if it's just two people on planet Earth, and they're one of them, the other person's dead because that's just what they're going to do. But I do think that there are probably people who are drawn to it because they feel like they're nothing, because they feel like they don't matter, and they feel like no one pays any attention to them, and they can't get any attention, and and they're like, well, I'm gonna, this, I know how I can get attention, and without that attention, without that outlet, who knows,
Right.
I don't know.
Well, like, I was reading a lot about Columbine, and that's almost straight out of Dylan Klebold's journals. Is nobody knows who I am, and I'm bullied, and this shit sucks, and whatever else, but everyone's going to know who I am after this.
Yes.
And I think that right there is so ingrained in this entire phenomenon, whether it's Luca Magnotta or Columbine or whatever else. And my biggest issue with it, which is really weird, is, well, I shouldn't say my biggest issue, but one of my issues with this whole I'm going to be famous thing is they're kind of right. I'm not saying like every school shooter that goes out now gets this, but Klebold and Eric Harris were right. We cannot think of a school shooting without thinking Columbine.
Right.
And so while maybe not everybody knows their names and they're famous in that way, they are definitely fucking famous. And I hate that they got what they wanted out of that.
Yeah, there's no question. Yeah, and I mean, for a segment of people, they are rock stars. You know what I mean? They're. I mean, you even look at really almost any of these type of, like Manson, Charles Manson. I mean, you look at any of these kind of killers, and they get flooded with fan mail. They get fan mail. It's just like buckets of fan mail. You know what I mean? They have people. They have suitors that are throwing themselves, trying to have conjugal visits in prison. You know what I mean? Right. It's like, it's a really fascinating dynamic.
Well, and you even get people who weren't trying to be famous killing people, like, say, Aaron Hernandez from the New England Patriots, right? He didn't want people to know he was murdering people. And
he definitely didn't.
He was getting crazy fucking fan mail, you know, like, people loved him way more. They were suddenly, like, he was getting so much mail. And that blows my mind because I'm like, who are these people sitting at home writing these guys? Whether it's someone like him or someone like Manson or whoever else. I'm like, who is sitting at home going, I really got to tell Charles Manson how much I want to fuck him right now. That blows my mind because these people are out in our community still. And to be honest, they kind of scare me more. I don't know.
That's the direction I'd love to explore more. Because I don't understand that psychology. I guess let me take it. But let me just put it into my own experience. So I'm drawn to this, right? Like I don't know why. Like I'm not going to write these people. I'm not going to say I'm not going to send them fan mail by any means. I'm horrified. I'm terrified. I'm repulsed. But I'm also drawn. Like I'll put it this way. So death, just within like the human species, we are inherently like the smell of death is so repulsive to us that we gag and we throw up because it's such a warning sign, right? It's like, for self-preservation, if you're around death, you are just, to get away. So you would think when we're exposed or we're confronted with the most repulsive acts of killing, just the most like there's this isn't war, this isn't there's no gray area. This is just an evil, demented, broken person who, for no other reason than just they killed someone. And it draws me in. What it should be is it should be walking into like a roadside restroom where the toilet's overflowing. You know what I mean? That should be the reaction. The reaction should be, get me as far away. You should be gagging. The idea of it, you should be gagging. And for whatever reason, I'm fascinated and I'm drawn in. And so I know that exists within me, and I could try and explore why that is and what's going on. So I take that a step further. So what would have someone go from where I'm at to, I want to learn about this person. You know what I mean? Or I want to, like, or I want to meet this person, or wow, I think I'm falling in love with this person. I don't know. I don't, other than maybe people like to fix things, they think that they're redeemable and they're the ones, it's almost like a God complex. I don't know.
That's an interesting point. I hadn't considered it in that way. I always go straight to the, I'm so turned on by your power, but I kind of like the savior complex idea. That's interesting. Huh.
Well, when you, I'm sorry, go ahead. I don't mean to cut you off.
I was going to say, you also have people who, there's that fame that those people get, right? From doing whatever it is and then getting on the news. And then all of a sudden, if I can somehow attach myself to this person who's famous, maybe I'll have access. I'll become, a favorite person to them. It's kind of like when we were in Arizona, Jodi Arias was everywhere and still everywhere. So it wasn't necessarily, she killed this guy to become famous. But she became famous because of the case, so famous that everyone around the case became famous. Mm-hmm. And, I remember, everyone that was involved in the case, at least with her case, because of how much time it was on television, the TV shows that came as a result, the interviews that she had, the wacky interviews that she gave. And it was the same thing. She had mountains of mail that were delivered to her. I think, she had all these, I hate to say she had extra privileges, but she had privileges that people were questioning. And the people that were writing to her or reaching out to her or going to the courtroom and things like that were all part of that same group of people that were kind of like, no, I want her free. I want to speak for, I want her to be out here. She's a victim. She's this, she's that, just kind of latching on to whoever that person is, possibly to save them. But I think one of it is, this is somebody who's famous that who was just like me. And I want to, somehow get close to them or at least get within their circle.
I think that makes tons of sense. Fame by association, I'm sure, is a huge component of it. But, it's interesting when you see a lot of these, and typically, when it comes to serial murderers, they're predominantly male.
Right.
So most of the times that you see the suitor, it's a female. But the thing about these women suitors is they always seem so sweet. You know what I mean? Like they're really kind and they, you would think that it would be like, if you had to do the stereotype, you know what I mean? You would think it would be like someone with a pentagram on their forehead and they'd just be like, fucking death, like, ah! You know what I mean? Like, you know what I mean? Like, you know what I mean? Like, wanting to dine on human flesh together, who knows? But they're like these, cardigan wearing, like church going, cross adorned Christian, usually, it's like woman next door. And so I wonder so if there's a psychological thing that's going on there that I think is more than guilt by or fame by association. That is, I either think that they want it's almost like they want to put their goodness to good use. And it's almost like it's like if you're the Michael Jordan of goodness, well, the best thing I can, you know what I mean? Like the winning the championship is to convert the most evil person into someone good. I wonder if there's, if that's a part of it. I don't know.
Huh. Yeah, I don't know either. But, I was thinking about fame by association, right? And when you say Kato Kaelin, there's only one reason anybody knows who the fuck Kato Kaelin is. You know what I mean? And
Celebrity Apprentice, right?
Yeah, definitely. I forget who else was on that show. Anyway, so I would never take jabs at the current administration. But no, so you think about somebody like Kato Kaelin, who got a bunch of fame just for being in the right place at the right time, so to speak. It's not somewhere I would want to be, but you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. So then, I mean, it makes sense to me that there's the savior complex people that you're talking about, as well as I want to be near your power and I want to see, even if it's not what it can do for me, just like I want to know why you did this and I want to feel special when you respond to me and that kind of thing. Because it's not like they know how many other letters Manson's responding to. You know what I mean? So it would probably feel special the first time he writes you back. And so I kind of wonder how much that plays into it too. Like, oh, I tapped into your humanity and you wrote me back and you took the time to reach out to me. Like, I could see how that could get addictive too. What do you guys think of that?
I think 100%. I was also, it's funny when you were describing that, I started thinking about being in a shark cage where it's like you want a safe, you want to confront extreme danger in a safe way. So I wonder if that's part of it. It's like, there's nothing, there isn't much more dangerous than a serial killer. And just, you know what I mean? It's almost like trying to get a peek. It's almost like taking a safari tour with the lions. You know what I mean? You just want to observe from a safe distance.
We talk about that with horror in general a lot.
Yes.
How horror is, like, especially like the movie theater experience, is kind of going to be in a safe place, but still be scared. And you still get to feel like you're a part of it, but you're safe. And I guess you would kind of get that with the letter writing. Like, Manson's not getting out and coming over, but at the same time, like, didn't you just give your address to a serial killer? I mean, that's a little weird, but, but I mean, you wouldn't think that way. You'd think it's not like he's getting out. Now, that certainly doesn't explain the conjugal visits, but yeah, I mean, so I can definitely see how all of that would play in as well. That's a great theory.
Well, it's also the fact that it's all this, for the most part, is being consumed by film, which is in the same way that we consume fiction. So obviously, so there's a big I don't think there's a big market for snuff films. No one wants to actually see the murder, but they want to know the murderer. You know what I mean? Which I don't get. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know. Cause that's me. I don't know. I can't, I mean, if I accidentally, I'm not a guy like when I mean, I know that there's still a lot of this going on, but I remember when the internet was first popping up, it was basically porn and these really crazy weird websites, you know what I mean? And then like the Encyclopedia Britannica. So it's like, I remember being exposed to images that I'd never seen before. I didn't know existed. These gross, horrific, people that got hit by a car or whatever it was. And that stuff, I'm a horror author. And so my imagination is twisted. It's messed up, but I cannot, stomach like real violence. I hate seeing a fist fight on the streets. I hate, it stays with me, but I can't get enough of these true crime documentaries where you're profiling the people who do this. You would think that I would just be like, why would I want to waste any of my time on this trash? But it's like, who knows how many countless hours I've spent trying to analyze the people who do these hideous acts, which I don't get. Don, I think you were saying earlier about, would these people do it anyway? And I think there's probably a spectrum. You know what I started thinking about? Do you remember when there was like when people started to streak, like in baseball games, when people would
yes.
would take their clothes off and run around and get chased, and and everyone would cheer, but you got to see it on TV, and then they made the policy where they weren't gonna show it. So now, and I want to say like it kind of stopped happening, or definitely like happens far less than it used to.
It cut down on it because I know even this past year and then at the last World Cup, there were a couple of incidents, and it was you knew what was taking place because the camera was not following anything.
Right.
It was, on the weather vane or something.
Right.
Because it was like, we don't want to give attention to it. And I'm glad you bring that up because we do the exact opposite when it comes to the news.
That's my point. Right. So it's like, every time something like this happens, it's the biggest headline. It's breaking news. It's bam, 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 bam. It's the biggest, boldest headline you could ever have. It's hundreds of millions of views and hits and, in eyeballs. And, I wonder if we took the, that same approach of we're going to turn away when this happens and you're not going to get any of that notoriety. I wonder if that would have any impact.
I don't know, because I think one, the story still has to be reported, right? But the problem is that balance of how much do you report and how much do you sensationalize. So if it's, if it happens to be, since we mentioned school shootings earlier, we'll stick with that. It happens to be the local high school, somebody kills 30 students, 5 adults, right? The story's bigger than the 35 people that were there because each person that has been killed impacts 3, 4, 15, 20 other people. So the story doesn't stop with them. Whereas, if it's like a local robbery, this guy pickpocketed 4 people. It's those 4 people that are directly impacted. And really the only person is going to be secondarily or indirectly impacted is somebody who, the son of a bitch stole my wallet. Now I got to call the DMV and the DMV people or the credit card people are going to be affected because now they have to deal with this. But it's not to the same level where it's grief. It's, you lost your best friend, you lost your favorite teacher, your coach, whatever, and they're not coming back. Whereas that wallet, all the shit that was in it, you can get that stuff back. So, the tragedy that comes with something like a death or serial killers or anything like that, it's hard to where that sweet spot is of telling the story to where you don't encourage anybody else from doing it, but still getting to the meat of the story so that people are affected by it, or at least there's some emotional connection.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and also, I feel like the media adds one component that is definitely not needed. There's always, interviews with this guy that met him twice, and then that guy's like, he was always such a stand-up individual. I don't see how this could have happened. We don't need that. We never need that. And that's just them trying to get more ad revenue and more hits and more downloads and more views. and I get it, but I think that is worse. Like when you're talking about the local high school, okay, that's a community that's impacted that needs to know, hey, there's a fucking active shooter out there. Right? Like that's important news. The follow-up bullshit of he was a Cub Scout, blah, blah, blah. Nobody fucking cares. That doesn't need to be out there.
Right.
And if you do care, then follow up on it on your own. But we don't need to be hand-feeding it to everybody.
Right.
Yeah, it should be like an Amber Alert situation. You know what I mean? And obviously there should be more preparation or whatever can be done to dispel it. But I wonder if part of the way to minimize it is not to promote it as much. You know what I mean? I wonder if that's if we're not doing ourselves a disservice by the amount of attention that we bring to it after the fact. Especially naming the name. You know, I mean, again, when the streaker's still going to streak, but if you don't, I don't know. I guess fewer streakers were doing it when they weren't being broadcast live on TV. You know what I mean? So if you knew as someone that was maybe compelled to do this, man, my name's not even going to get in the news. Like no one's going to know I did this. You know what I mean? I wonder if that would discourage a portion of people that otherwise would. I don't know.
You know, I have an example that's semi-related that I think actually proves what you're saying. So I'm a big wrestling fan, right?
Nice.
And there's been this ongoing thing where fans will like jump in the ring and try to get like 3 seconds of fame, not taking into account that these two dudes in there doing this scripted thing are about to whip your fucking ass for real.
Right.
Okay. And so the Hall of Fame at WrestleMania last year, dude jumps in the ring and takes a swing at Bret Hart. Okay. Bret's a fucking stroke victim. And yeah, he was huge in the 80s and whatever else. You're literally attacking a senior citizen stroke victim over here, okay? And so he punches him in the head and then, like, jumps out of the ring. Well, first off, like, a bunch of people, like Ronda Rousey's husband, I can't remember his name. Anyway, big MMA fighter guy.
Mm-hmm. I think Travis something. Isn't it Travis something?
Yes, it is Travis something.
Yeah, dude.
But yeah, so Travis, like, goes after this dude. And then Dash Wilder, who's a wrestler, just hauled off and just KO'd this dude.
Oh,
like,
damn.
Dude's just walking by and Dash just like, bam, right?
Oh, man. Yeah.
Nobody knows this guy's name. We all know him as the motherfucker that got knocked out by Dash Wilder. We all know him as the guy that took a swing at Bret Hart. But we don't know his name. We don't care about him, right? We love the retribution of this is what the fuck happens to you.
Right.
And I think that it really proves what you're saying, because there was a rash of all these people jumping into the ring and they were releasing their names. And then when they quit that and they just panned away from the ring or the wrestlers just kicked their asses or whatever else, it's really toned down. Like it still happens, but now it's weird when it happens. Whereas for a while it was all the time. But I agree that I think that the name thing has a lot to do with it, because you're not getting famous. Do you want to get famous because some dude knocked you out? That's not a great reason to be famous to me.
Yeah, for sure. Travis Brown is the guy's name. Yeah, that guy's a beast.
Yes, thank you.
I think that's just baked into us. Anything being known for doing something is such a motivator for doing it. You know what I mean? Even like just going, on a day-to-day basis. Like if you want to go for a run, you know what I mean? Part of the cool part is when you come back and someone sees you sweaty. You're like, yeah, they know I did it. You know what I mean? It's just like, right. So yeah, then you multiply that by however many, millions of eyeballs that we thrust upon it. Yeah, it's interesting. Yeah, I mean, I don't know how many people are out there just like, even if they don't want to get caught and they don't want to have their name mentioned, I think that they want to strike fear. They want to, you know what I mean? They want to be the boogeyman. You know what I mean? I think that's why, even if they don't want to get caught or they don't want to strike fear, that's why they'll eventually reach out to cops. You know what I mean? And start writing to them and start an interaction and engaging, because they want to, even if they don't necessarily want, because they don't want to go to jail, but they do want to in some ways be known and recognized for what they're doing. I think that's a huge component.
Oh, I agree. I mean, you talked to me before we ever did this. You knew I was going to talk about BTK at some point. And BTK, that's exactly it. Like, he had these murders from like I don't know, the late 70s into the early 90s, and then it just like went away for a while. And then the 30th anniversary came up, and the news ran a story about it being the 30th anniversary. And all of a sudden people cared. And then at that point, BTK wrote the cops again. And he's like, no, you guys were saying maybe I died or I was arrested, but no, man, I'm living it up. I'm having a great time. And he sent them proof by sending a driver's license of one of the people that he had killed to no, this is really me. This is me, you know, like, but it's interesting to me that BTK didn't give a fuck until they ran this story on the news and got details wrong. And then he was like, whoa, buddy. No, I gotta set this straight. And for anyone who doesn't know, BTK stands for bind, torture, kill, because that was his method of murder. And what I love about BTK, that's the wrong term, but you know what I'm saying. What I love about this story is this dude could not wait to talk about it.
Oh, yeah.
He wanted to talk about it so bad. And so he writes the police and he's like, oh, I'm going to start again, blah, blah, blah. And then he starts sending them clues. And he literally was like, if I send you a floppy disk, are you guys able to track that? And the cops were like, no, we're not. Like in the most Homer Simpson fucking moment of murder.
That's hilarious.
He's like, great, the cops can't trace me. And he sends them a fucking disk, which they immediately trace.
That's
and
beautiful.
They can tell that he used it at the church where he was a pastor and that he used it at the local library and something else. And he had dropped it off behind a Costco in a cereal box. And so they watch the Costco tapes and they see his fucking car. So they pull up like who the people at this church would be. And he's one of the top suspects. So they drive by his house and his fucking SUV from the Costco tapes is there. You know, and they're like, well, that was easy. And when they're talking to him, this just blows my mind because he's being arrested and, you know, there's like, I think 10 murders that he was found guilty of and blah, blah, blah. And his sole concern, he's like, why did you guys lie to me? That's not fair.
That's right.
And so then, you know, he initially pleads not guilty. And then he goes to court and he immediately changes it. He's like, oh, no, I'm guilty. And then this guy is the most real life example I've ever seen of a supervillain who gets caught monologuing because he cannot shut up.
Yeah.
And he's just like, oh, no, man, when I was stalking these two down, blah, 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 I did this and did this. And I think his testimony is something like 30 hours. And the families were sitting there listening to the details, which I can't even fucking imagine. And, you know, like, and he has no remorse, has nothing. Oh my God, I've been waiting 30 years to tell somebody all my cool little things I put in, you know, and it's so fascinating to me. And if anybody hasn't seen this tape of his confessions, just go watch even 5 minutes and you'll just be like, what the fuck is happening here? You know,
what you talk about, he has those soulless eyes. He has like no, you know, there's no humanity in his eyes at all. It's just total, you know, he's just totally dead inside. But what did he call his victims? Because he would talk about stalking, but he had like all these like code terms. Like, what was it? Just prey or what? I can't remember what it was.
They were his projects.
Projects.
Yeah. Isn't that amazing? Like, I mean, again, I know anybody listening to this, we don't need to keep apologizing, but I feel like a shitty human being saying this.
James, it's okay. You're not praising the guy for being killed. You're intrigued at the usage of his language and the tactics that this guy was. Just the boldness of this guy.
I know all of that logically. It doesn't change the voice in my head. But
wait, which voice?
All of them. But no, like, he's just like, oh yeah, I had this other project where this was happening, and it's just that disassociation from other people as human, and like just all the glory. And the closest thing I can compare it to in my own life is like when somebody reads one of my novels and they're like, oh, I caught this little thing you did and this little thing, and then I'm like, oh, but did you see this one over here, right? And I'm just like, is that what it was like for him? Only it was like real life murder? Like, holy shit, you know?
Well, to bring it all the way back to Luca with Don't Fuck with Cats, he had so many little like Easter eggs in his crimes. You know what I mean? Like he was like, because he was drawing from all these movie references.
Right.
I mean, talk about someone who actually wanted to be a movie star, but it had no talent. Actually, I think that's what he was. He wanted to be an actor, and he could be an actor, and he was a psychopath, obviously. So he's like, well, I will become a real life character, real life villain. But yeah, I mean, he, like in order to catch him, they were having to like follow these breadcrumbs of like movies that he was referencing. And like he would put up posters on the wall behind killing these cats that offered clues into where he would be going or where he was living or what he was doing. You know what I mean? It was so yeah, I think that they could get pretty clever is the wrong word, but I wonder if there's like a field guide manual. You know what I mean? Imagine, what was it like, the anarchist's cookbook?
Yes.
Yeah.
Imagine if someone published, or if there's like in circulation, just like a up to date. Here's what we know as psychopathic killers. How to not get caught. I wonder if that exists anywhere. I'm actually surprised someone hasn't tried to publish that, even as like a goof, even though that's it's not goofy, but
yeah.
I'm surprised nothing like that is out there.
It probably is. We probably just don't know where to look.
There was one character on the Drew Carey show years ago who was obsessed with serial killers, and he made some jokes on a date, and he said, "Oh, I'm really into serial killers, blah blah blah." I said, I know about Ted Bundy and this guy and this guy. He said, and I know how not to get caught. And of course, the girl just like walks away from him, like, "Oh."
yeah, that's gonna ring the creek bell for sure.
For her.
Being as being people who write and consume horror, so as we all know, there's this big kind of stereotype around horror fiction, film, whatever. You know what I mean? Like it's not for decent people, right? You know what I mean? Like when you tell someone, oh, you write books? Well, what kind? I write horror books. Oh, I don't read that. You know what I mean? But but these people are glued to the news, to the fucking news. You know what I mean? Can't get enough carnage. Probably would be, are probably fascinated by serial killers. You know what I mean? Would be able to go to a high, to a tea luncheon and have a lovely conversation about killers. I just wonder where the disconnect is. It's like ours is actually make believe. Like we haven't actually killed anyone at all. Don't want anyone dead. You know what I mean? But that's like filth. But learning, actually seeing the real stuff is more acceptable.
I mean, I don't know about you guys, but for me, one of the big draws to writing horror is that it's how I make sense of things. Mm-hmm. When I write a slasher or I write whatever, like I have a motivation for the killer and I can understand why he did the things he did, even if I don't agree with him. And I can kind of make sense of it. And I can make sense of this person died because they made this choice, or this person lived because they made this choice. And when I look at reality, I don't have that. Like, I don't know why my dad had to die of cancer when he did, or I don't know why COVID's killing thousands, or I don't know why, some random school shooting happened and these particular kids died, that kind of stuff. And that shit drives me insane. Like, I get really fucking depressed and I get really down. And horror allows me to take all of those feelings and put them into something that I can make sense of. Mm-hmm. And it's really helped me. Like, I still have a lot of mental health issues, obviously, but it's really helped me kind of come to terms with shit. And the biggest example I can give you is Sandy Hook. Sandy Hook sent me down the biggest fucking spiral of anything that's ever happened to anybody I didn't know. Okay. And all I could think was why these little kids, and it just kept fucking with me. And when I look at like other school shootings and I see like teenagers, I can get it a little more. Like I can get like maybe this group bullied this guy, and so there was a reason for it, but I never get those answers. Mm-hmm. And what writing horror does is it allows me to explore those feelings semi-safely, like we talked about before, because anybody that I'm dealing with deaths of isn't real. And it doesn't affect me the same way, but it allows me to sort through my feelings.
Mm-hmm. So what do you think, as just people who are consumers of violence? What do you think that, how's that work?
I don't know. I don't think I have an opinion on that. I've never really thought about it enough to have an opinion on it. I guess my initial kickback on that would just be kind of the same thing, but that's how they deal with it. Like they're still ingesting it from a safe distance. They still have their regular lives going on, and they can turn it off at any time.
Yeah, it's like exposure therapy, I guess. It's like, take a small, safe dose of whatever you're most afraid of, and it kind of diminishes the fear, maybe.
What do you think of that, Don?
I'm still trying to process it, but I think, do you mean as far as the consumption of real horror versus real REEL horror, or as far as making the sense out of it?
I meant what Brian was just saying about the people that consume it anyway, consume violence that way. Like
that one's a hard. I mean, I can go back to at least this way that we ingest or consume. I guess the serial killer type of stuff, or the true life murder stuff. I think what it comes down to is human curiosity with that. Like, this person was on the news for, like, the first one I always think about when we talk about serial killers is Ted Bundy. It was the first televised murder trial, and he got famous for several reasons. People were, the murder stretching so many ways, the brutality. He's a good looking guy. He's articulate, all these things. You had people that were pleading his case and saying this guy couldn't have done it because he doesn't look like a serial killer. So I think a lot of people get in the curiosity of why would someone, especially like you mentioned earlier, James, they mentioned they were a Cub Scout or all the other type of bullshit that they've gone through their lives. They try to make sense of why this person would do it. And just from being accused of whatever the crime is, or even if they see, crime footage, just bloody, gory crime footage themselves, they look at it and say, well, I'm not sure if this guy could do it because he doesn't look the part. Mm-hmm. But this guy looks like my neighbor. And then those wheels start turning and people realize, like, oh, shit, I wonder if my neighbors are into this type of stuff. I wonder if somebody near me is killing someone. And so it starts to create this, or at least expand upon the curiosity that people already have based off their surroundings and, the people that they don't know or the people that they do know, and thinking like, hey, like you play the game of 5 with your spouse or your significant other. Yeah, I'm sure people have that game of 5 of who's most likely to be a serial killer who lives near us.
Right. Well, and that kind of does explain it, but do you think there's so the people that just flat out say no interest in fictional horrors, that's ridiculous, not that type of person, but they are the same person that is going to write a fan letter to Ted Bundy, what do you think where do you think that disconnect lies, if there is even one? You know what I mean? That fictional horrors are off limits, that's nonsense, waste of time. Real life horrors, I'm all in.
I think it's the fame and celebrity that goes along with it. Or we mentioned the savior thing earlier, but I think especially with the cases that are in the news or on the news more regularly, especially when the trial is taking place, you have people that have that interest in being part of the story. If I happen to be the guy that Jodi Arias writes back, I can then go to the news and say, oh, yeah, she wrote me this letter and she said this and said this. And then I get to be on TV. And so now I'm the guy that Jodi Arias talks to, outside of prison. and, she trusts me. Or I think there was even somebody who was selling her art. So there's some way I can now be connected to this. So I'm not even processing it as this person killed. I'm processing it as this is somebody I saw on TV who's famous. And, if I happen to be that type of, I guess that lecherous type of person, I can latch on to them and get some fame based off of it. Or, I really believe in their innocence and, hey, I want to get them out of jail. There's no way she could have done this. She's too pretty to have killed this guy.
Right.
And I would add, I don't know about the people that actually write serial killers, but the people who won't read horror, won't watch horror, but are obsessed with the news.
Right.
The response that I've gotten from family members, friends, etc., who feel that way is there's enough wrong in the world already. Why are you adding to it with these stories?
Right. I've heard that as well. Yeah. And that's also but typically, they have no experience with what these stories actually are like. You know what I mean? What's really awesome is when you have people in your life who feel that way, but because you're their nephew or their, you know what I mean, they know you in their life, they feel obligated to read your book, and then all of a sudden they're like, oh my God, I loved this, I had no idea what, you know what I mean? It's just, I think a lot of it is ignorance, and I don't mean that in an offensive, but I just think people are ignorant to what actually, these horror stories are designed to achieve, or what the motivation is for writing them, and the ways that they can illuminate, people's lives in ways that they wouldn't have expected.
Yeah, I would definitely agree with that. We actually have a panel that we do at some conventions when there's conventions, and it's tentatively called "Trust Me, This Is Not a Horror Panel," and it's basically about how you think you don't like horror, but you watch these things that are horror and have horror elements, and you don't even pay attention to it. Like Doctor Who, everybody's like, "Oh, that's a sci-fi show," and it's fucking horror with no blood.
Right.
You think horror is just Saw or just Hostel, and there's so many different subcategories and different things going on, and there's no reason for them to know that because they're not in the horror world and they don't have that experience of knowing there's a whole spectrum of stuff. The same way that if I'm just gonna pick romance books, right? I wouldn't know all the different subcategories of that. I see some covers, they all look pretty much the same to me. My initial response might be all romance books are the same. And of course, logically, I know they're not. But that's how I view it. It's kind of that same way. Is why would I know this when I'm not engaged with it?
Right.
So
that's when you try and convince someone who hasn't read a whole lot of horror that Cormac McCarthy is a horror author. You know what I mean? They want to throw you out the door. You know what I mean? But I think a lot of it is semantics and marketing gone awry. I don't know. This is completely out of left field. I want to get out there because it was in the back of my mind, and I think we addressed this at some point in terms of a motivation for killing, or maybe even it's want to be associated with it. You always hear this power component. You know what I mean? It's not, they don't like violence. They like power. You know what I mean? They don't like to instill fear. They want to dominate. They want to have power. I've always struggled with that. And I think it's true, but I don't think it's the right word, or I don't think it's the most precise word that can be used for it. And I don't think that word has been invented, at least not to my knowledge. You know how, as writers, you all know what I love about language is finding that really precise word. There can be 5 words that are synonymous with one another, but there's the one that really gets to what you're trying to convey. And it's almost like with different languages. There are certain languages that have words for emotions that we don't even know really what that emotion is because we haven't labeled it yet. You know what I mean? So we haven't really, So I think there's a word for the kind of power that these killers get off on and are after, but I don't think we've come up with the right term for it. So if anyone is in there, what's the whole thing where you take the root of words and you come up with the proper word? Is it it starts with intermediate? What's the term for it? Anyway, if anyone out there, I would love for someone to coin a new term or new word for the type of power that is really what these killers are after when they do what they do. That's a challenge.
Wow. Yeah.
You know what I'm saying, though? It doesn't feel like the exact right word. I know what people are trying to convey. I get that there is a power component, but power is just too general. I think we can narrow it in a little bit more with a new word. And how cool would it be if a new word was coined from this podcast?
That would be amazing. Yeah, I was thinking about Cormac McCarthy since you said that. And I think that if you presented one of his books as a horror movie, like when you're describing it, people would get it faster. Like, hey, this kid leaves Tennessee and he hangs out with a bunch of vicious scalp hunters. Like, wait, what? Like, but people don't view it that way. And it amazes me how some people kind of use it as a defense mechanism. And it goes deeper than that. Like you look at like Silence of the Lambs. Very, very much a horror book, horror
100%.
movie. And yet when it came out, the studios were like, don't ever call it horror. It's a psychological thriller. It's this, it's that. And because they wanted the awards and they deserved the awards. But by not calling it horror, people gave it a shot and they loved it, of course. And even today, I find people that when I say it's a horror movie, they're like, oh, no. And I'm like, what? There's a fucking cannibal and there's like a guy keeping a woman in a well so that he can rip her skin off and make clothes out of it. Like, what is not horror about this to you, you know?
Yeah.
And it's amazing how that term, the word horror, to so many people automatically means it's crap. It's not good. It can't be great, you know?
Yeah,
and I look at like Jordan Peele now, and even still, like people like justify, well, Get Out's horror, but it's not. And Don, don't even start. I don't have 2 hours, but if you want to hear Don's thoughts on Get Out, please go listen to episode 2 of our podcast. It's amazing how even all these decades later, we hold on to that, like as a society. Oh, horror. No, it's not horror. It's this, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And I wonder if that's what people are getting out of the news. Like, even though it's worse than horror, it doesn't have that connotation.
It does. Yeah. I mean, that, whatever. Yeah. I can't handle it. Like, it's too intense for me. But yeah, to your point, one of my favorite, I don't like to be like, I don't like the gotchas, I don't like to be like gotcha, but the only one I like to do is when people, they'll talk to me. You'll meet someone in a waiting room. Oh, what are you reading? Blah, blah, blah. Oh, who are some of your favorite authors? And I love Stephen King. Oh, I don't read Stephen King. I'm like, yeah. I mean, I'm like, well, I mean, I don't know. I mean, did you like The Shawshank Redemption? Oh, yeah, it's one of my favorite movies. Well, then you love Stephen King. You know what I mean? Shawshank Redemption, maybe not. Obviously, it's not his most horrific. You know what I mean? But it's like people. There's just this blanket, just this knee-jerk rejection that people have without realizing that they're probably, I don't know. I think people are missing out on a lot of stuff just because they're unwilling to give it a try. But anyway.
No, I use Shawshank a lot, and I use Stand By Me.
Yeah, Stand By Me. Green Mile is another one.
Oh yeah, we did a whole episode on Stand By Me, and it's the only thing we've ever done that I got an email about, and they were like, it's not really horror. What are you doing with your podcast? And I was like, we say in the episode, like, these kids are going to see a dead body and like they're dealing with loss of childhood and all these other terrifying things is all horror, buddy. And, but yeah, anybody that says they don't like Stephen King, those are the two I go to. I'm like, do you like this? Do you like this? Oh, those are two of the best movies ever made.
Exactly.
And I'm like, number one, you're fucking right.
Right.
Like two of my favorite movies of all time. But number two, yeah, you gave Stephen King a chance, whether you realized it or not.
Yeah, and you're a fan.
I like using Disney movies to make that same point.
Mm-hmm. Tell me about it. Yeah.
Okay, Frozen's great, but if you really look at Frozen, it's a horror movie as well. Actually, both of them, Frozen 1 and Frozen 2.
I like to, at least back in the 60s, the Disney was some of the most psychedelic stuff out there. What was Fantasia?
Yes.
God, that's like the trippiest thing you ever watched.
Speaking of the 60s, that actually brings me into something I wanted to ask you when you brought up Manson earlier. So I look at, and not just the 60s, but, just that whole, let's say, pre-70s time, right? Like, you have somebody like Manson, you have somebody like Charles Starkweather, and these guys were so fucking famous for what they did. But I kind of wonder, do you think, this is my question to you guys, do you think it's because these things weren't being reported on all the time or weren't pushed as much, whether they were happening or not, but do you think that played into it? Like, people didn't know this was an option, shall we say, and then Manson did it and everybody was like, oh, holy shit, or Starkweather did it and people were like, oh, wow, people can do that. Do you think if the media was reporting on that stuff the way that they do now, that Manson and Starkweather would be bigger than they were? Or do you think it would have pushed more people to do it, or what?
I think with Manson especially, it was the brutality of what took place, who it was, and where it was. Not to mention, this idea that, hey, I'm gonna create a race war by having all this. It was the spectacle of what was being done. Sharon Tate was of course a film actress. You had her and I think 4 other people were murdered. It was a cult that was attached to it. There's all these different variables that were part of this, to where it wasn't just, and it wasn't even Charles Manson who did any the actual violence. He was inspiring it and having his followers do it. It was just the mere spectacle of it, the time, and then who it is, as opposed to, this one cult leader or group member or whoever it was decided, I'm going to do this. I think he'd probably be even more famous, or I won't say more, he would gain more notoriety if it were done today, because you have so many different media outlets to display what was taking place, and to have somebody who leaks photos of the crime scene, then random interviews with everybody who lived on that street, everybody who lived out near, their compound, all the crazy conspiracy theories saying, hey, this is the government is trying to take your minds off of whatever. And this would be a bigger story in the 2000s than it would have been in the 1960s.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think it would be a bigger story. I think the reason it lasts so long and it still lingers, I think it got wrapped up in part of a cultural movement. Mm-hmm. It is almost, and it's one of those things where obviously there's so much conspiracy theory around it. But just because, that term has been so, again, the term's almost like horror, where if you're associated with it, it's just you're a lunatic. But, I think, so why was that one, why was that particular case, why did they make such a big deal about that one when obviously there's murders going on simultaneously during that time? Is I feel like it was part of propaganda. It was leveraged as propaganda, where you mm-hmm. had this hippie movement that was about love and peace and the war's bad, and everything else, and then all of a sudden you have this kind of leader of this person that's part of that movement. You know what I mean? He was a hippie, and he was, and he had this whole hippie commune, and all of a sudden, there are these homicidal maniacs, and I think they were able to say, that's what happens when your brain's on drugs. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? It's see, being a hippie's bad, they're murderers, they're vile, they're druggies, they're criminals, they'll stab your babies. You know what I mean? That was an opportunity, I think, for powerful people to squash almost to weaponize it for political aim.
Yeah, and that makes a lot of sense, especially with how they pulled in Helter Skelter.
Yes. And
used that as well. So I'm looking at that and I'm thinking now we're still politicizing it, right? Right. The left uses school shootings as this is why we need to get rid of guns. And the right uses these kind of things as if everybody had a gun, this wouldn't have happened. And we don't give a shit on either side. I mean, we do, but we don't. About the kids that died or that kind of stuff. The focus is always how can we use this
right.
to push what we want to push. And so, yeah, so I guess you are right that it would be even bigger because we have more ways to use propaganda and we have more sides doing it.
Yeah, no, I think so. I think doing weaponizing thing for political aim was probably less. There were just less outlets for it back then. You know what I mean? That was like one of the first examples of it that at least that we can point back to. Whereas it happens all the time now. It's just, you know what I mean? Everything. The first thing you do is, well, you know, who's, you know, what's the agenda? Speaking of real quick, did you guys know that there's a new book about Charles Manson that just came out? In fact, it's like being released now. So this investigative journalist spent 20 years on the case, and it's some pretty wild stuff. I listened to a podcast about it recently, where there are a lot of, and again, this is all, you know, it sounds wacky as can be, you know, so I don't know, but that a lot of the players that were around and associated with the whole case and Manson in general were players in the MK Ultra. You know, I mean, and there's legitimate documentation that he uncovered. That's like, you know, this guy was kind of in charge of the MK Ultra, you know, program, and kept, like, Manson, I guess, kept getting, you know, thrown in jail for various things. And this individual kept paroling him, like kept making sure he got out of jail, like the same person. You know what I mean? Anyway, it's just, he's made a lot of really interesting links between Charles Manson and the CIA before the murders ever happened. That's the kind of stuff I find super fascinating. I don't get wrapped up in conspiracy theories, but God, they're seductive, and I love. That's like you know, my form of you know. I guess that's the nonfiction that I go for, even though it's because it's a little bit fiction. You know, I don't know. It's not that I believe it, but I find it fascinating and entertaining.
Yeah, definitely. No, I had no idea there was that book coming out.
It's called Chaos, Charles Manson, the CIA, and the Secret History of the 60s.
Interesting. So if it's all right with you, I want to switch gears for a minute. I know when we started talking about Don't Fuck with Cats, you noticed something very divisive about whether or not people wanted to watch it. Would you like to get into that?
So, you know, the film was wildly polarizing. And one of the major reasons it was polarizing is because the initial victims that this you know, person kills are cats, actually kittens. And there were so many people who are, you know, typically, you know, within the horror community, even that typically, you know, true crime fans, you know, fascinated by serial killers, that this would totally be kind of in their wheelhouse, and they couldn't touch it, couldn't go near it, didn't want anything to do with it, were totally repulsed by it, you know what I mean, afraid of it, everything else, because what is being killed are cats. Now, I don't like, and I'm being dead serious here, I don't kill roaches. You can ask my family, you know, I don't kill wasps. I don't step on ants. I don't like anything to be killed. But if I had to be forced to play a sadistic game of does this die or does this die, and on the left is a cat and on the right is a human, the human lives. You know what I mean? But so I do want, I am kind of curious just the psychology behind the fact that no way I can't watch anything where an animal's being killed versus how many people, you know, like humans? Yeah, I'm in. You know what I mean? I wonder what's behind that.
I'll go ahead and take this one. So this was me 100%. When we were talking about the episode and what we would want to look at, and you wrote "Don't fuck with cats," I literally went, nope, not doing it. Like, I was like staring at my screen like, is he fucking with me? Like, you know, I was like, did somebody tell him how I feel about cats? Is that what's happening here? Cats are like my safe space. And my two cats, I don't know what the hell I would do without them, because when I'm depressed, that's who I go to. Mm-hmm. And so this film for me, film, show, whatever you want to call it. Basically, the reason my line is where it is because I feel like the cats are innocent.
Mm-hmm. So,
and I can watch almost anything happen to a human because horror films are so good at making things look realistic that I can write it off. And I can convince myself in my brain that it's not real. But in horror, there are rules that, not always, but often, like, don't kill the dog, don't kill the cat. And if you do it, don't show it. Mm-hmm. Right? And so maybe it's that I'm not used to it. And so I can't separate my love for my two kitties from what I'm watching. And so maybe I have that extra thing, whereas I have a lot of humans that I don't want to say I'd be happy if they died, but like I can justify like humans they aren't always great, right? And
humans are more responsible for more harm than cats in the grand history of the planet.
Yeah, and just like humans put themselves in positions, or like they had a chance to get out and they didn't take it, or there's all these other little justifications. And I'm not saying any of this fucking makes sense. I'm just trying to tell you where my head is.
Oh, 100%. That's, yeah.
And I think that's what it came down to, is I can't accept this completely innocent death. The same way, like, I wouldn't be able to handle a baby or a small child. Whereas an adult, I'm like, meh, so I don't know. Maybe that's it. I don't know. But yeah, I was definitely one of these people that I was never going to fucking watch this. I wasn't going anywhere near this. I was pissed off every time it was like Netflix was showing it to me while I'm scrolling. I didn't even want to see that, And then I watched it and I looked away anytime the kittens were on the screen. I will fully tell you that because I didn't know. Are they going to show the whole thing? Is it going to be a quick flash? What is it? And I just wouldn't even take that chance, right? But I kept powering through. And by the second episode, I was so into this damn documentary. Like, I was just like eating it up and staring at the screen the whole time. And, then it got to the man who is killed. I want to say his name's like Lin Jun, maybe. And I was completely that person that's like, they're like, oh, and this went viral and you could see this and people were breaking stuff off and picking out clues. And I was like, that would totally be me. And even in that moment, I was questioning this. Like, why am I okay with that? And I'm not okay with you vacuum seal the cat, so yeah. I don't know if I'm explaining this in a way that works for everybody, but that's really what it comes down to for me, is that cats are innocent.
Yep.
And I don't know. I don't know if that's where everybody else was, but that's where I was.
I get it. I think that makes sense. And I had to look away too. I couldn't watch the scenes with the cats. I have no idea what they showed. I just couldn't even bear to watch.
I literally don't know.
Yeah.
Don, did you watch it? Did you watch those parts?
I watched it. What do they... I hate cats, first off, and this is a horrible segue. I hate cats, but I don't want harm to come to them. So, for me, if it's a dog, I'm immediately like, don't you fuck with that dog. Don't you do it. Or even when the Mandalorian, when Baby Yoda got punched in the face, I actually jumped up from my couch and was like, you fucking asshole. You just punched Baby Yoda. Like, I was cursing at the screen. And my daughter, I would say that she learned a new word, but she had heard that before. So I had an attachment there. But when it came to this, I felt like an ass because I'm sitting there telling my wife the entire time, I'm like, I know a person gets killed, and I'm going to feel worse about these cats getting killed than this person. This guy doesn't deserve it. I mean, it's not like kind of how on Dexter he gives an excuse as to why he's killing the people that he kills. This one was a murderer. This one was a drunk, habitual drunk driver. This guy seems very innocent. It was just an issue of he was afraid to come out to his family. He found somebody that he thought he was going to have, an evening with. The guy kills him. So, and he was just as helpless, or I should say just as helpless as those cats, because he wasn't suspecting what was going to happen to him. Mm-hmm. And I think Teresa even remarks how there was that similarity between them of like, this guy was, he was trusting this person. It was very vulnerable that moment. The cats were vulnerable. I watched because I was sitting there thinking, like, they're not going to fucking show it. They're not going to show it. They're not going to show it. And thankfully they didn't, because I know people out there who would want that to be shown on this just so they could see it. And I don't mean like personally know that. I just know there are people out there in the world who say, man, I can't believe Netflix fucking. I mean, if you've seen Tiger King, you've seen crazy shit on Netflix. But no, when I watched it, it was that same reaction a lot of people have, which is I did feel worse for the cats than I did for the person, but I felt bad for both.
Do you think that would be different if we got more, like, to use a film comparison, like if we had more characterization and more time with the victim, do you think that would be different, or would you still care more about the cats?
I think it opens it up because we don't know that much about him, that it could turn to us not feeling that badly about him. I mean, you have people speaking on his behalf. You have his friend who speaks on his behalf. And of course you see the scenes with the young man's family. So you feel bad for him. I just think that some people would excuse it if you had more, I think it's June Lin. If you had more of June Lin that was included in this, where somebody can say like, well, you know, he wasn't a completely squeaky clean person. And I like the vagueness that comes with his background, to where I'm like, I have no problem seeing him as an innocent bystander, innocent victim of what took place. I don't want to open it up to, well, you know, he shoplifted when he was 7 years old. He right. You know, because there are people, we've seen murder trials like that, where somebody brings some bullshit up from somebody's past and it's like, well, you know, he smoked weed once. It was like, when did you smoke? Well, it was like 12 years ago. It was secondhand smoke because he was passing by a parking garage, but he should have crossed to the other side of the street. But I think the way they present it, it allows even the casual viewer to still have sympathy for this young man who was murdered, as they should.
Isn't it weird how we make excuses with the killer and say, no one could have seen this coming? He was a Boy Scout and he was a church pastor. But then with the victims,
that's funny.
We do the direct opposite. And we're like, well, like, why was he there in the first place? If he wasn't homosexual, he wouldn't have that problem. And if he wasn't meeting random people on the internet, like, isn't it weird that as a society that we do those two things concurrently?
I haven't thought about that.
We do the same thing with sexual assault. It's never the rapist's fault. It's always what was she wearing or what was he wearing? Why was she or he out that late? You know, it's always put on the victim first, as opposed to the piece of shit who's murdering or raping.
Yep.
Status has.
Sorry if you get offended by me calling someone a piece of shit. Yeah, that too. That or liking beer.
Yes, right. I will say that that Don't Fuck with Cats, just as someone who watches a lot of these type of true crime shows, that one messed me up as much, if not more, than any other one I've ever watched. It left me, it gutted me. I felt dirty at the end of it. It was it was fascinating. It was one of the most intriguing. If you had to fictionalize it, the killer was just one of the most insidious and weird and
yes.
Just psychologically curious people. But yeah, it was dark. That's a dark, I don't know, man. I just sat there kind of like with my mouth open for a while. Like, then I just showered. I just had to take a soul shower. One question I have. So speaking about the media attention, like the symbiotic relationship between audience and motivation to kill, do you think, or let's just do an experiment. What if we found out, or what if someone started to, and I guess they've done this to some degree, but not to the extent I'm talking about. What if someone was on the run, like this Luca guy, and started to live stream his stalking and his projects? What kind of audience do you think that would generate? If, like, you know what I mean? If, like, you knew that the police are trying to catch this person, it's almost like the streams itself could be used as evidence. You know what I mean? Kind of like what these people were doing in trying to pick apart what the videos to find out if there were any clues. I wonder what type of of audience would be generated by someone on the loose that's going on a killing spree and recording it live.
So I had told you that recently we did a film called Tragedy Girls. And basically in Tragedy Girls, there's these two high school girls who have a true crime blog and Instagram and kind of stuff. And basically they start committing murders so that they can get the best pictures and they can get the story before everybody else and that kind of shit. And their follow count goes nuts. Like, what are they at the end, Don? Like 2 million followers, something like that?
Oh, it's in the millions.
So, I mean, I know that's not reality, but I don't think it's far off. And I think that if a killer could do that and could live stream without completely giving himself away, like, I think that's the game right there, right? It's how much can I show you while not getting caught? So, like you wouldn't necessarily want to show the victim's face while you're stalking them, but the game would be, look at the neighborhood I'm in, or like, where is this neighborhood? Is it in Philadelphia? Is it in San Francisco? Like, where are you trying to find me now? And him traveling and all that stuff. I think you would get massive followers. And I'm not trying to get anybody to do that, but I mean, I think whether you're into the chase, whether you're into what he's doing, or whether you're just a horrified person who watches the news all the time, I think this fucker's follow count would be insane.
I think you're right. A couple things. One, I think it would become appointment viewing. Two, it would be fascinating to see which networks picked it up. Because you know that someone wouldn't be able to. Someone would just understand the just amount of it viewership it's going to get, and then once one person picks it up, then they all have to pick it up.
Right. Well, it's like those high speed chases that at a certain point they cut down on going live with those because it was encouraging people. I don't know why, but it was encouraging people to do the same, but it was also endangering people. I remember there was a serial shooter a few years ago. Might have been 2 or 3 years ago at the latest. That actually did that. He was looking for his estranged girlfriend or wife or something, and he just started shooting people on Facebook Live. Mm-hmm. And the last person, or at least one person that was caught before Facebook, found out what was going on and then cut the feed. They ended up live broadcasting this one man's murder. Mm-hmm. But I mean, he was literally just driving around saying, "Oh, I can't remember the woman's name. He's like, oh, Wanda's such a bitch. I can't find her. I'm just going to shoot anybody I can find because of her." Right. And I remember he walked up on this little old man and, asked him some random question.
That's right. I remember that. Oh, my God.
Shot him right there. And it was one of those things. I saw it by accident. It was one of those things where, I'd heard that it was going out, but it like came through my feed and I saw it. I was like, holy shit. Like, I did not want to see that. And it was just as horrifying as you think it would be.
But I think that takes this whole discussion to the ultimate is what does it say about society? What would be who would be watching? And, you know what I mean? Like, let's say if this killer put out an ad in the New York Times and was like, at 8 p.m. on Tuesday, I'm going to start killing people on such and such website.
Right.
See how long it, try and catch me. You know what I mean? And in the whole discussion of, if we don't watch, maybe he won't do it. We have to watch to see if we can catch him. You know what I mean? Versus the people that are just spectators because it's, wow, we're messed up. We're a messed up animal.
Well, even if you look at the first episode of Black Mirror, the whole thing's about the Prime Minister fuck a pig on national TV?
That's right.
But the reactions of the people watching it is where the story is to me, because it's not, would you watch this? Because you can't just ignore this. No matter where you go, it's on. People are talking about it. It's everywhere. And you can't be that person that missed out, right? Like, you got to know, did he fuck the pig? Did he not? And even if you're completely repulsed, all of these people are watching. And I think that that's very, very reminiscent of what we're talking about here. And not to get too far off of this, but I look at somebody like Logan Paul, the YouTube guy who went to the forest in Japan that's known for being the suicide place. And, you know, he went in there purposely, and then they found a body of somebody who had recently committed suicide. And then basically he had this big breakdown on the show like, oh, we didn't think this would happen, blah, 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 blah. And people ate him alive for it. And my whole thing with it was, you fucking went in there. Like, what did you expect? Like, you had to be looking for that.
Right.
And whether you're apologizing or whatever, I don't give a shit. But, like, your initial thing of, oh, we didn't think we'd find that, I take two ways. And I swear this will all come back together here. But I take it two ways. Either A, you're fucking lying, and that's exactly what you were looking for. Or B, you thought it was safe.
Mm-hmm.
And either of those, to me, come back to, would we watch this person live streaming? Mm-hmm. Like, is he really going to do it? Is that really what we're looking for? Or did we think it was safe? And I don't know. What do you guys think of that?
I think it's a good comparison. One thing, then I'll kick it over to Don. Just real quick, I love that you brought up that first episode. Charlie Booker, the creator of Black Mirror, immediately became one, if not my favorite creator of I call that a horror show. I think, even it's a lot of sci-fi because of the balls it took to put that show, to lead with that episode. Do you know what kind of conversations he had to have with they were like, look, you could do the episode where the prime minister fucks the pig. Okay, we're going to let you do the episode. Do you have to start with the episode? Can't you lead, can't you kind of, wade into this thing? He's like, no, I'm leading with the fake fucking episode. I just think that's so brilliant and ballsy that he immediately earned all my respect the second I saw that. Sorry, I just had that.
No.
My hot take.
In all honesty, I think as a society, it would just be like that Black Mirror episode. People would watch, claim that they're not going to watch, tune in, maybe pull out their phone someplace where other people can't see them doing it, just to see what's going on. Because I remember, and both of you might remember this as well, but I remember early 2003, 2004, whenever it was, like Al Qaeda was cutting people's heads off, and they were putting it online, and they were even giving the times in which they were going to do it in order to upload, whatever their latest execution, murder, or whatever was going to be. And there were people that I knew of that I was going to college with that, they went and watched the videos. One, because they were like, I just want to see if it's real. And, I had these conversations like, why the fuck do you need to see somebody get their head sawed off? It's like, but it came down to that curiosity of, and I would even venture to say, and I hate to use boredom as an excuse, but I think it came down to, their own boredom or their own break with reality and not understanding that this is some real shit for somebody else. And you're going to use this as entertainment to cure your perceived boredom. So I'm going to go and watch somebody get their head cut off in real life just to see what it looks like. But yeah, if this were done as far as some serial killer announced, hey, this is what I'm going to do, people would tune in.
I completely agree. I do wonder. So the base motivation for it, I wonder if it goes back to self-preservation. I wonder if it's like because the world in general has become, at least in our side of the world, has become so relatively safe and simple. You don't have to hunt for food. You don't have to watch out for bears. You don't have to, you know what I mean? Like there's really, and I think we're hardwired to be on the lookout for danger. That right. Absent exposure to danger, I wonder if we have to seek it out to kind of remember that we're vulnerable. I don't know.
Huh. I really like that.
There's some logic there.
Definitely. Hey,
think of all the sponsorships that would probably go into this as far as, the serial killers using, it's going to be a really timely reference, a Ginsu knife. And then someone comments like, oh, no, if you want to, there'll be somebody somebody in the comment section is like, no. If you want to cut through bone, whatever, however he's committing the murders, if you want to cut through bone, this is the type of knife you need to use. And then critiquing his murders. Holy shit.
Well, what if he has the ski mask on, and then all of a sudden by the 6th episode it has a Nike swoosh on it?
Oh my gosh! Sign up for my Patreon and my Just Fans or is it OnlyFans or whatever it's called.
I mean, once we've hit OnlyFans, I think that we've covered just about everything, right? So I mean, we've gone from Starkweather and Manson through Columbine, through BTK, through Don't Fuck with Cats. And Brian, man, I just want to thank you for coming on the show today. Like I said, you pitched something so different from what we're used to, and I've just enjoyed the hell out of it. And I love that you challenged me in a way I didn't know I wanted to be challenged, and I have dug this episode so much. You are welcome back anytime, man.
Well, I appreciate that. Absolutely. Well, thank you for inviting me on. I've enjoyed it. Time flew. So thank you. I'd be happy to.
So why don't you take a minute to once again tell our listeners where they can find you online, tell them about your books and anything else you want to push right now.
Certainly. Well, just kind of, as I said at the beginning, you can find me. Twitter's probably the best. It's at Brian __ Kirk. Facebook as well. But my website has all links to both, work that is available for purchase and social media, which is briankirkblog.com.
Excellent. All right. So that wraps it up for this week. As always, I am James Sabata.
And I'm Don Guillory.
And we'll see you next week here on the Necronama.com.